When I grew up in the Westfjords, I remember the local fishermen being the heroes, the knights in shining armors of the area. We would see them come in their smaller boats, coming in with salvation. They were filled with fish, they were filled with hope. During the last 40 years, we had to find new ways of actually creating value from our products. We're seeing innovative projects in every town. They show the people there a new way of creating value from something that was considered leftovers. They might be, for many cases, the knights in shining armor.
Our planet and our civilizations are changing faster than ever before. Join me as I travel the globe talking to startup founders using technologies to make our world more interesting, accessible and livable. These are the entrepreneurs that are creating the future we will live in. This is Now Go Build. Iceland is astonishingly beautiful, but it's also harsh. It's a severe environment of lava rock, deep cold water, and earth-shaking volcanic eruptions. Winters are dark and long in this essentially treeless landscape. Yet somehow all these elements just add to its beauty and, surprisingly, its livability. In the last century alone, Iceland has become one of the most developed nations in the world and with one of the greenest economies. This is due in large part to the resourceful and pragmatic approach born of living on a volcano in the middle of the North Atlantic. For over 1,000 years, these descendants of Norse Vikings have evolved their way of living on this sparsely inhabited island, with a waste-nothing approach that uses scarce natural resources in novel ways. Iceland startups are inspiring ingenuity in the country's tech landscape and beyond. They've also inspired my visit here to see how AWS can help support their development and growth. What can we learn from a country that celebrates such inventive efficiency? The waters that surround Iceland are some of the healthiest natural fisheries on the planet. And here in Isfjordur, in the Westfjords, Fertram Sigurd Janssen has discovered a highly innovative use of what was once a waste product of the fishing industry, healing the wounded with the skin of Atlantic cod. Bertram, pleasure meeting you. Thanks for having me here.
Welcome.
Thank you. Let's visit Kerris's.
Awesome.
Okay.
This way.
Tell me, what are we seeing here?
We take fish skins from the fish processing plant,
Okay.
and we make a medical product out of it. So grafts. These are grafts that are used for wounds and for surgery.
Okay.
In Iceland, we have a very big fishing industry. The fish is brought to port. It goes into the fish processing. The fillets are created, and the fillets are deskinned. And normally the skins are thrown away, and we make our medical product out of the fish skin. I was working on a prosthetic company, and I just witnessed this incredible problem that all the customers of that company, they have been amputated because of diabetic wounds. Yeah. So we were thinking about how can we create a material that actually can heal those wounds so there are not so many amputations.
Okay.
And what happens is that the doctor gets our material and he has a giant wound that has not responded to treatment. It might be a diabetic patient, it might be someone with a big burn wound. Yeah. And the doctor takes a knife and he cuts away all the dead tissue from the wound and he makes the wound bleeding. Mm-hmm. Then he takes our material and puts it into the wound bed and then he puts a wound dressing on top. And what happens is that the human cells, they will start to crawl into the fish skin and they think that they're at home. They think they're in the human body. Yeah. But they see a lot of holes. Then they say, oh, we need to crawl in and refill those holes and start to make new tissue. And over time, the fish skin is remodeled to human skin over 2 or 3 weeks. And we've been doing this now here for 5 years, and we treated this year more than 10,000 patients.
Og ég hef starfað sem rafvirki langs tíma. Já, það var ekkert svoleiðis tilfelli þar sem við vorum að skipta háspennu eða spennir. Einhverju hluta vegna þá bý ég til svona skamhlaup með líkamanum sem gekk mjög erfiðlega þar sem þetta var svo mikið svæði sem var brunnið. Já, ég fór svona að koma aðeins til að konan mín fór að segja mig frá því að það hefur verið mjög mikið vandamál, mjög erfitt að eiga við svona stór og mikil brunasár til að fá þau til að gróa. Og skorið hér og hér, hendina var stungið í gegn meðan sárið var inn í maganum til að koma af stað gróanda, flýta fyrir gróanda.
So we get the fish skin from the fish factory, then we descale it, and then we take the skins into this room here, and the skins are decelled in this facility here.
Oh.
So if we have the fish skin with fish cells in it and we put it into a wound, the body would go on an alarm. There's fish DNA, you would get allergies. So here we are actually removing the cells in a very gentle, proprietary manner.
So what's left then?
It's collagen, fats, hyaluronic acid, laminin, all sorts of very complicated structure, three-dimensional structure.
But no cells?
No cells, yeah. And then when we've extracted the cells, we have the fish skin, like this here, but full of tiny holes, like a scaffold or a template.
Okay. What are we seeing here?
So here people are removing the fascia from the fish skin, and they are scraping it off. So you see there are flesh rests. We don't want any flesh rests on them, because there's a molecule in the flesh that causes a fish allergy. So you want to get rid of the flesh rests. And the next step after this is quality inspection. And that's where we're using artificial intelligence. And the problem with quality inspection is that there are so many specimens that the humans, they lose their attention because there are so few errors. There is one scale on every 1,500th piece.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're inspecting 1,500 pieces, you lose your focus and actually you miss that 1,500 too.
As with any innovation, bringing new concepts and products to market at scale without sacrificing quality is always a challenge, especially when there is no margin for error. When one errant cell can result in disaster, quality control is essential. A problem well suited for machine learning and a problem easily solved with support from AWS. Pleasure meeting you, man. So, what else do you guys do here with technology?
We are working currently on trying to automate a few of our manufacturing processes. You saw at our other facility, we do all of our scraping where we are cleaning fascia and flesh remains from inside of the skins.
Yeah.
We want to automate that a little bit to include computer vision and assist the staff for quality control.
And so do you make use of, let's say, the standard ML techniques like recognition, or do you develop your own algorithms?
We are developing convolutional neural network to analyze the images. We are really relying on cloud computing for this task, and it needs to happen pretty quickly.
Plus that, you now suddenly have evidence of what happened throughout the process, where it's harder for humans to sort of write down, this is what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And so, things become facts instead of intuition.
Yeah.
Atlantic cod is not the only abundant resource in Iceland. There are massive amounts of fresh water stored in some of the most impressive glaciers on the planet, and an incredible amount of volcanic heat coursing through geologic layers upon which the Icelanders have built their homes. The country is powered almost entirely by hydropower and geothermal power. But even with these natural sources of energy, there's a potential for waste. In true Icelandic form, Nanam, here in Reykjavik, is using the cloud to collect and analyze data that will not only help mitigate this waste, but also revolutionize the storage of renewable energy. Hey, Armin.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. 99% of the batteries at this moment in the world are lithium-ion.
Yeah.
But you guys are departing from that. So tell us a bit about what Nanam is doing.
So Nanam is creating these breakthrough materials that enable batteries to last longer and have a longer cycle life, to be more environmentally friendly. And we basically have building blocks for the batteries of today, where we put our nanoparticles inside of lithium-ion batteries to kind of reduce the amount of materials that go in there to increase the efficiency. But we're also using these breakthrough materials to build the products of tomorrow. Because if you think about it, the ultimate battery is having no battery at all.
Let's go back to the beginning, nanoparticles.
Yes.
Tell us what we should envision when we think about a nanoparticle.
Well, it's 1/billionth of a meter. If I take a little thin business card that's 100,000 nanometers thick, And actually a business card is a good way to describe it because I have the front of the business card and the back of the business card, and we kind of understand the surface area of something we're looking at. But if I now cut that into 100,000 layers, I have so much surface area to work with, and I can create several football fields. So now what's happening inside of a battery is there's an interaction between the materials.
So the particles basically create a big ion membrane.
Yes, yeah. All of a sudden you have more space to work with, more area, and it sort of changes the dynamics of what you have in your hands. Thomas Edison invented a battery over 100 years ago. He put it in a car, it had good range, and it was a very environmentally friendly battery. The only drawback was that it was very heavy and it was kind of insufficient to produce.
Yeah.
But if you can replace these larger battery plates with nanoparticles, carbon fiber, special electrolyte, you're just reshaping what an environmentally friendly battery can do.
So the red ones are your Edison?
These are the Edisons,
the Edisons.
yes. And you can see the bigger white one is the original one. The plates themselves are, these are the original ones, and we're doing it with this instead. So like this is the difference in the way you kind of approach it. This is how much it weighs compared to like several of these together, So it's like a game changer in that aspect.
Yeah, but you can imagine that if your batteries, which are now a very large part of the weight of a car or an airplane, if you can reduce the weight of that, it's a significant winner in terms of energy use. I understand you're also working with traditional energy companies, like here in Iceland.
Yeah.
So they're looking for long-term storage of their geothermal energy.
Yeah, what's interesting is that the problem the world has right now is not really capturing renewable energy, it's storing it. And we have like geothermal, it goes 24/7 obviously.
Yeah.
We made these little modular units that you can take to, if you want to power your house, you serial parallel connect them like Lego blocks for your house. But if you want the geothermal plant, you just use more units and you increase the amount of these cells.
And of course, the storage of energy is a generic problem.
It's a generic problem, yes.
And it's not just unique for Iceland, but the technologies that you develop here will be applicable anywhere, regardless of what the energy source is.
Exactly. This is on energy. This is battery.
Hello, hi.
Hello, hi.
I'm Werner, pleasure meeting you. Thank you for having us here.
We operate a combined heat and power geothermal station, producing electricity for the whole island and hot water for the Reykjavik area.
Iceland's an interesting place because we transformed this whole country by getting access to renewable energy and kind of realizing what we had in our own backyard.
Yes, we are blessed with natural resources here in Iceland, and we produce electricity using hydropower. Around 70% of the electricity produced here is produced harnessing the energy from waterfalls. And then the 30% is produced using geothermal resources. This is what we do at Power. We are mainly a geothermal company, and we produce around 20% of the electricity produced in Iceland.
So hydropower combined with geothermal power basically covers 100% of the electricity usage here in Iceland.
Yes, 100%, yeah.
So the steam comes from underground and is transferred to the power plant through pipes. And then very hot steam is input in here, and then the steam is used to generate rotation in the turbines. And then the electricity flows from here to the grid and then to the users.
It's actually an interesting process because you go from heat to kinetic energy to electrical energy.
Exactly, yeah. And we use also, because it's a combined heat and power plant, so when they use the steam to generate electricity, it cools down and turns into hot water. And then the hot water we use to heat up the cold water. And then we've utilized the steam twice.
With traditional power plants, or the fossil fuel ones, you can turn them up and turn them down based on what the expected usage is. But I mean, you can't turn your power source off here or less or more. So what are the big challenges around that?
Yes, that is true. It's called baseload power, and we basically produce the same amount of electricity every hour of the year. And this can be a challenge because the demand for electricity is higher during the day than during the night.
But then storage of the energy that you produce and that is not immediately being
Yes.
Distributed
Yeah.
must be a very important part. What kind of techniques do you use to store the energy?
So when you are producing hydropower, so you have a waterfall and you have a reservoir. The reservoir basically acts like a battery.
Buffer.
It's an energy storage. In geothermal power plants, we don't have a reservoir. And it can happen that when demand is low, and maybe a little bit lower than our production, there's waste created in the system. Battery storage is one of the technologies that could help us solve this.
So, we heard earlier when we talked about hydropower that basically the basin of water is the buffer. So, what would be an ideal buffer for thermal?
Yeah, I mean, any battery you look at, whether it's in an electric car or a laptop, it's all modular, it's all many units coming together.
Yeah.
So the more that you can create units that modularly come together in an easy way, the closer you are to tackling any energy problem, whether it's a huge one or a small one. The abundance, the sheer volume of what's going on here is the really exciting stuff, because that mirrors what's potential for the world.
Yeah, and of course here, weight doesn't necessarily matter that terribly much.
Yeah, I mean, here it's about not wasting material, because you have a really environmentally friendly battery, but it kind of crosses the threshold of being really usable if it's too expensive and if you're depleting the planet of the raw materials to make it.
Yeah.
So if you can get that efficiency in a smaller unit, then all of a sudden you have this environmentally friendly 50,000 cycle capacity battery that is very well paired with geothermal and sustainable energy sources.
So if you talk about a cell, that still sounds like a traditional form factor.
Yeah.
One of the things that you guys are working on is on different types of form factors.
If you start really thinking outside the box, you're no longer tied to lithium and you're no longer tied to putting it inside of this unit, but you start decentralizing the energy source and you start making up the layers of the battery together with other materials. So we take carbon fiber and nanoparticles and we make that. It looks and feels like carbon fiber. You can shape it the way that you shape carbon fiber, but because of the nanoparticles that are hidden within it, it becomes a battery plate. The idea is that you fit this into the way things are manufactured. So what if you were building an electric motorbike or something out of carbon fiber, and what if that could become the battery? You would build it the same way, but you would set it up as a battery. And if you puncture this, it still works and it doesn't heat up when you're charging it. So the things we're used to a battery doing that are bad, this doesn't really kind of go into that territory. The key is to kind of distribute it in larger objects, and the better that the technology gets, the smaller the object is that you can sort of disrupt. So you start with a bigger, fishing boats or boats are actually ideal because there's so much space in the structure.
But your approach, I mean, if you build your boat out of, as a battery, you can't throw your battery away after 2 years.
No, exactly. And what actually, when we talk to people that are building these products, what you realize is the best way to bring it to the market is actually to do a mix and match, where you use a structural battery along with a regular battery, and then the structural battery takes all the short trips and the fast charging, and you triple the lifetime of the lithium ion. And then the stronger your battery gets, eventually you'll design the whole product around the structural battery.
So tell us a bit how compute and data processing and analytics plays a role in your development process.
Yeah, it's actually the key to everything, because on the starting point is our materials, and we need to understand what type of materials we have in our hands, and we need to be able to reproduce those materials in the same way when they give good results on the other side. So we're analyzing nanoparticles, but we're also trying to hypothesize what would happen if we mix together different types of materials, or if we go down in size from 100 nanometers to 50 nanometers. There's so many factors changing, and then we're collecting all that data and analyzing that. Then when you're looking at something like a new type of battery, you don't have any historical data. When the first question somebody's going to ask you is, how many cycle lives does it have? Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, but the battery is only 2 months old. I don't have 10 years of data. So then you need to also hypothesize what would happen there. And any tweak that you make inside of these products, you're trying to figure that out.
And so if I look over the past years, there's probably been thousands of companies that have tried to tackle the problem that you are tackling.
Yeah.
The majority of those have not succeeded. So why do
Yeah,
you think
yeah.
that you will be succeeding where the other ones failed?
There's a lot of labs all over the world that have put nanotechnology into products, but it's kind of no use to no one if you have just $1 million battery that you can't sort of move out of the lab and into the product.
Yeah.
Our starting point was the fact that we invented this novel way of using a lot of methods, including a particle accelerator, to actually create massive amounts of nanoparticles, which is really relevant to just kind of getting it out of the lab and into production. What makes us unique is the fact that we can adjust our methods to all these different battery chemistries. So we're not betting on one type of nanomaterial that is going to save the world. We're using a method for accessing the attributes of all these materials and working with partners that already know that certain things work, and we're giving them like a super layer on top of that makes things more efficient.
Yeah.
The timing seems to be good right now because we're all aware of the importance of changing how we do things. Iceland is a great place to run with things, to test things out, to validate things. What the silicone chip did for Silicon Valley, Nano can do for Iceland. We can start a new story from here.
The natural resources that Iceland has used to become one of the greenest economies on the planet are not readily available to the rest of us. Some of us are landlocked or lack geothermal energy to run our cities. This country is as unique as I've ever visited. So what can we learn from them? Possibly the lesson here is to look in our own backyards. What do we have at our disposal? What are we wasting? How can we use modern technological advances such as the cloud to increase our own efficiencies and unlock new ways of living and working? Maybe Iceland's greatest export will be its approach to living with its natural resources. Lessons forged in 1,000 endless winters on a rock in the middle of the Atlantic may just be the kind of thinking we need to live in balance on Earth.